Hello, I'm American Johnson of the YouTube channel NonCompete here on People's Education Program, also streaming in association with Midnight Books and All Power Books. And I believe we're also streaming on Luna Oi's channel. And in just a few moments, we'll be joined by Luna Oi herself. But first, I just wanted to say thank you to the People's Education Program and Midnight Books and All Power Books for inviting us to do this stream. We're very excited to work with both of these bookshops. They both have been just great comrades in working with providing Luna's translation of the Vietnamese curriculum of Marxism-Leninism, which you can get at All Power Books and Midnight Books in California. Luna Oi, if you're not familiar with her, is a Vietnamese communist educator, content creator, and translator, currently working on translating the entire Vietnamese curriculum of Marxism-Leninism. Currently, she's working on part 2, historical materialism. Part 1 is already available at Midnight Books and All Power Books. And the ebook is also available for free at banyanhouse.org/shop. Those links are all in the description. Midnight Books is a revolutionary bookstore and community space in Whittier, California. Midnight has served the community with radical text, poetry, arts, and political education. You can visit them online on Instagram at Midnight Books LA. All Power Books is a revolutionary bookstore and community space on West Adams in South Los Angeles. All Power serves the community with political education, a free clinic, Saturday grocery distributions, and more. You visit them online at All Power Books on Instagram. Both spaces survive off of your support. So buy a book, maybe Luna's book, if you feel like it, make a donation, and keep socialist spaces alive. Thank you so much to those great organizations. We're really glad to work with them. Luna is adjusting her camera, but she will be joining us in just a few seconds. But I just want to go ahead and introduce the topic today. The series that we are joining is covering the CIA around the world, and Luna will be doing a presentation on the CIA in Vietnam. You probably have heard about the activities of the CIA during the war with the USA, including the Air America shenanigans and the other various sundried war crimes committed by the CIA in that war. But Luna will be telling the untold story, the story of Vietnam before the war with the USA, the involvement in France, and the lead up to the war with the USA. So if she will sit down in her chair, then I can introduce our keynote speaker, Luna. Are you ready to go? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, here's Luna. Hello, Luna. You good to go?
Hi. Suddenly my second screen just doesn't work. It's very annoying. It says no signal. Hi, everybody. Hi.
Will you be able to?
Yeah, it's gonna be a bit inconvenient. Is I don't have a second monitor, suddenly so it doesn't work. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Luna. I am a Vietnamese communist born and living in Vietnam, and this is my honor to be here today and have a chance to, talk to you and about a topic that a lot of us care about, which is the CIA and the Vietnam, and it's gonna be a very interesting and yet the topic today I'm gonna focus about the early history of the CIA in Vietnam and their involvement, the part that usually not get much attention and acknowledged by people, especially people in the West. Because when you talk about the CIA, usually you only care about, mostly you talk about in the Vietnam War or, the war against the communist Pol Pot, and then even like in the Cold War and also the modern day CIA. But most of us do not pay enough attention about the origin of the CIA and, their very early involvement in Vietnam directly with Ho Chi Minh too. So today I want to give some light into that period of time and how the relationship changed. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, EJ, can you help me share the PowerPoint? I don't have a second screen right now, so it's very hard.
So you want me to do the PowerPoint on my end? Okay, I can do that. Let me just open it. I don't have it. I don't have a second screen either. Let me see.
My internet is totally weak.
Yeah, have you tried adjusting the cable?
I did. I tried the whole thing. It worked fine. Okay, now should work. Okay, here we go. I have to unplug and plug it again.
It's working, or do I need to do it?
It's working now. It's working now.
Okay, I think it'll be a lot more. Okay, I think it'll just be better if you control it yourself, because then you'll be able to.
I know. Yeah.
So, okay. Yeah. Well, I will step out before while Luna does the presentation. But I do want to just say, and I think Luna agrees with me, that solidarity to the people of Palestine who are suffering tremendously right now. They were just given an illegal order to evacuate 1 million people to the south, and that's basically logistically impossible. Not only that, but there are also reports that people who are evacuating are being targeted by violence. So it's obviously a very horrible situation in Palestine. Luna did write a blog post recently on our website, non-compete.com. So I'll put a link to that in the description if you want to read that, about the history of Vietnam and Palestine solidarity. But anyway, I just thought we needed to mention that before we begin the actual presentation. But I will let Luna now take it away with the presentation on the CIA in Vietnam.
How to start the presentation? How to full screen it? I am Ding Dong, EJ.
You click start in the top black bar. It says start from beginning. F5. You can just push F5 and it'll full screen it.
F5. Okay, here we go.
Okay.
But it's in both of my. Okay. Oh my gosh, this is the first time I use new PowerPoint. So, got it.
You probably should have done a little rehearsal before. Okay. Good luck.
I love you. great. It's great to be here today. Let's see. Let's share this window. This. All right. Here we go. Thank you all for watching. Free Palestine. Yes, exactly. Free Palestine. Can't talk about that enough. All right. Okay, now let's get to the main topic of the stream today. Today, I want to talk about the CIA in Vietnam, the untold history. And now let's start. All right. Okay, there will be two main topics in my presentation today. Topic number one is about the OSS and the August Revolution in Vietnam in 1945. You know, how they got involved in this August Revolution and how it turned out. And right after that, it is the CIA and the friendship between the CIA and the French from 1947 to 1954. And it is a very interesting part of history that not many people know about it yet. The first topic, the OSS and the August Revolution. This is the picture of the team member, one of the very first members of the OSS team in the USA in 1944. These are, you can see like the origin, the foundation of the CIA. You're looking right at them. All right, in order to understand the involvement of the OSS in Vietnam and the August Revolution, first we must understand the background information about Vietnam during this time. So as you know, Vietnam was under occupation and colonization of the French from the 1850s, from the 19th century for nearly 100 of years in the 1940 like that. And Vietnam was in miserable situation and under the heavily exploitation by the French colonialists. And at that time, like through World War One and World War II, Vietnam was even heavily more exploited by the French because at that time, France joined the World War One and the World War II, and they lost. Of course, they have a lot of loss during those two wars. That was why they wanted to exploit Vietnam even more. And for nearly 100 of years of occupation and colonization, they turned millions of Vietnamese people into slaves. They forced millions of Vietnamese farmers into slavery by, like when the French came here, they opened plantation, black pepper plantations and rubber tree plantation in Vietnam. And they forced Vietnamese farmers to go work in those plantations. And I want to talk a little bit about this so you can have a more understanding about the connection between colonization, like colonialism and capitalism in the matter of Vietnam. The reason why Vietnam was colonized heavily by the French, it was because of the car industry. So, in the 19th and early 20th centuries, the car industry was blooming in Europe. And in order to make cars and sell cars, they need rubber to make tires for their cars. And at that time, the Michelin car tire company in Europe, they needed rubber to make tires for their car. And since they cannot grow rubber trees in Europe because of the environment is not good for rubber trees, they colonized the heck out of countries in Asia, and one of that was Vietnam. And Vietnam was colonized because of the Michelin car company. That is very sad, but true story about the two reasons why Vietnam was heavily exploited by the French. So after they conquer Vietnam and they successfully colonize Vietnam and set up plantations in Vietnam, the Europe came up with synthesized rubber. Means that they didn't even need natural rubber anymore. And what do you think that they would do at that time? They should have at that time. Should they just like free Vietnam because they didn't need us for rubber tree anymore? But actually, no. They continue to stay in Vietnam and extract our raw material to save their own home country. And instead of growing, instead of having rubber tree plantations, they started bringing coffee and black pepper in Vietnam. And to this day, Vietnam still have very big, agriculture of coffee and black pepper. It was because of the, colonial time. Vietnam was colony of the French, right? So after that, and then right after, like they got the coffee and black pepper in Vietnam, World War I happened. And French, they lost a lot of wealth during this war. So yes, they came back in Vietnam in 1920s and built a bunch of factories in Vietnam and forced millions of Vietnamese people into near slavery. I mean, on the paper, they paid us a little bit of money, but it's nothing compared to the standard of living at that time when we were starving and being enslaved by the French colonialists. After that, in World War II, of course, they came back, but now this history, the real history of the topic I want to talk about today really started in 1940 when the Axis, they were winning, Nazi Germany and fascist Japan and also fascist Italy, they were winning. In Asia, fascist Japan, they attacked China. And then in 1940, they came to Vietnam and they attacked Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. They called that at that time, they called us Indochina. Now, at that time, Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia were already occupied by the French. And in theory, the French and the Japanese hated each other and they were on different sides, right? Theoretically, but the truth is, in Vietnam, the fascist Japanese and the colonialist French, they work together. They shake hands together to exploit Indochina even more. Now, this is to tell you the nature, the true nature of capitalism, colonialism, and fascism. Even though they claim to hate each other, they claim capitalism, they claim that it's so much better than fascism. They want to fight against fascism. But Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia are the biggest example, of how colonialism, capitalism, and fascism shake hands with each other to exploit us even more. And in 1941, 1 year after the first attack of the fascist Japanese, the Japan and France signed a mutual defense agreement to co-rule Indochina. And right, so in the matter of just a few years, Vietnam was under the miserable living condition by the French, and now we have one more layer of exploitation, which was fascism. And in 1943, both France and Japan forced Vietnam to send out 130,000 tons of rice to feed the people in France and in Japan. And in 1 year after that, in 1944, that number was increased to 180,000 tons. They left us nothing to eat. It was nothing left, and not just rice. They took all of raw materials that they could find at that time to feed both of the country. Imagine a poor exploited country for over 100 years in Vietnam at that time. Now got exploited even more by both colonialism, capitalism, and fascism, because both France And Japan took raw material out of Vietnam back to their motherland so they can feed raw material to the factories in their own motherland, so to make profit for capitalists. So in a matter of just 7 months, from October 1944 to April, May 1945, at least that we know of, at least 10% of Vietnamese population died of starvation. The Vietnamese population at that time was just 22 million people, but over 2 million people of Vietnamese died of starvation. And at the same time, another reason for us to have that terrible famine was because not only they took like hundreds of thousands of tons of rice out of our country to feed their own people, they forced Vietnamese farmers to stop growing rice, to destroy our rice. Then we had to grow jute for them. The jute is because at that time, because due to the World War II situation, they lacked the rest of the world, the global market, they lacked cotton to make fabric, to make clothes for rich people. In Vietnam, we had a perfect environment to grow jute. So that was why the fascist Japan, they forced Vietnam to grow jute so they can take all the jute back to their factory, back out of Vietnam, back to the factories, the textile factories in Japan, to make the capitalists in Japan rich. That is a very painful truth. And the thing that you should know about when you talk about fascism, colonialism, and capitalism, and how they actually feed each other like that. So that is a situation of Vietnam, 1944, 1945. It was how miserable. And look at the pictures here that you're looking at. This is the real picture of Vietnamese people who were starving to death in Vietnam due to colonialism, fascism, and capitalism. Now, and a lot of Vietnamese people wanted to end. They hated this situation. They hated all the French and all the Japanese, and we wanted independence and freedom. All right, right around that time, 1944 is kind of the ending of the World War II, and at that time, the alliance was already formed, and at that time, the U.S. had a special Office of Strategic Services. In short, is OSS. And their main target at that time was to collect information to fight against fascism. And at that time, they had a secret headquarters in Kunming, China. Kunming is a city that near the border, the south of China, and near the border with Vietnam. And at that time, there were a very few, but some French soldiers who hated fascism, and they wanted to end the existence of fascism in Vietnam, mostly because they want to be the only ruler of Indochina, not co-ruler with Japan anymore. So that was why some of them contacted the headquarters of OSS in Kunming, China, to talk about the actual situation in Vietnam and try to seek for help from the alliance in the Indochina situation. So that was why in November 1944, OSS sent a special team they called the Deer Team. They sent the Deer Team with like secret aircraft and like that. They flew from China to Vietnam, and at that time they met Phạm Văn Đồng, the general of Vietnam at that time. And after that, Phạm Văn Đồng brought the Deer Team of OSS to meet with Ho Chi Minh in the jungle in the Bắc Pông Bó in the north of Vietnam. And then in the picture, you can see that you can see like the Phạm Văn Đồng is wearing the white suit on the right side, and Ho Chi Minh was on the left side, taking picture with the OSS Deer Team. And you can see like Ho Chi Minh at that time, he was very skinny and he looked very, very weak. It was true that he was suffering from malaria at that time, and he was very close to death. And luckily, it was thanks to one OSS Deer Team member that brought, the right kind of medicine that they could save Ho Chi Minh's life in 1944, right? And at that time, pretty much the relationship between, the OSS Deer Team and Ho Chi Minh was pretty close, because shared one same enemy, which was the fascist Japanese. All right, after that, in August 1945, after, about nearly a year of the OSS Deer team gave military training to the Viet Minh with the leaders Ho Chi Minh and Võ Nguyên Giáp, and gave us some of the, weapons like aircrafts or guns. Vietnam successfully had a communist revolution in August 1945, and we usually refer it to the August Revolution. In that matter of just a few days, the French was very weak in Vietnam. The fascist Japan was being, defeated in the world, and especially in China. And the UK army is not yet moved to Vietnam, and also the Chiang Kai-shek's army is still in the border with China. So kind of in the matter of just like 5 days, that all forces of enemies in Vietnam were weak. We managed, Ho Chi Minh and the Viet Minh managed to kick out, successfully end the existence of the government of the colonialist French and the fascist Japanese in our country, and declare independence and freedom. And during this very important period of time, the OSS, also supported us in a sense that, they fought us side by side to kick out the fascist Japanese. And to tell you how, like the view of the OSS member about Ho Chi Minh, and this is an excerpt from a report from Captain Paddy of the OSS team. He wrote in September 1945, just a few days after Vietnam gained independence. This is a report. Have had long conference with Prime Minister Ho Chi Minh. At the time, Ho Chi Minh is still the Prime Minister. And he impresses me as a sensible, well-balanced, and politically minded individual. His demands are few and simple: limited independence, liberation from French rule, right to live as free people in the family of nations, and lastly, the right to directly deal with the outside world. Those, you can see, those are very simple demands of Ho Chi Minh. It's not much at all. And that is, the official report from the OSS to the US government at that time. But the history turned to a different chapter. Now move to the second topic, the CIA and France from 1947 to 1954. All right, so despite the pretty much the positive views of the OSS captain about Ho Chi Minh and Vietnam, the US government disagree with all of that. So in 1947, the US government decided to dismiss the OSS team, Office of Strategic Services, and on the foundation of that, they formed the CIA. And, and then right about around this time, 1946, 1947, when the CIA was formed, Ho Chi Minh at that time repeatedly confirmed to the US that he was an internationalist communist who just wants freedom and independence for his people. Now, because of this, the CIA and President Truman, that you're looking at his face right now, totally turned their backs on Vietnam and on Ho Chi Minh, despite, the brief, short, but quite a positive relationship that we, Ho Chi Minh, had with the OSS. The CIA and the US under Truman dismissed, refused all of that. And during this amount of time, Ho Chi Minh wrote 8 letters to Truman asking for friendship and technology training opportunities for 50 best Vietnamese students, but there was no reply whatsoever. You can just go to the CIA archive right now online and read all of these 8 letters by Ho Chi Minh to see how desperately Ho Chi Minh wanted to be friends with the USA. And we have no intention to have a conflict with the USA or to attack USA or anything. We just want friendship and peace and independence and support from the USA like that. But because the whole existence of the US government is anti-communist, so of course, Truman and the CIA ignore all of this. And instead, they immediately backed France when France sends their army back to Vietnam and tries to turn Vietnam into its colony once again. So back a little bit about the part that I talked about before. 1945 August, we successfully kicked out the fascist government and the colonist government by the French in Vietnam. But just a few months after that, from 1946, the French immediately wanted to come back because they wanted to colonize Vietnam once more time. And that led to another 9 years of arduous fight of Vietnamese people against the French from 1946 to 1954. And the moment when the CIA was formed, they immediately backed the French. Because you see the true intention of, the US and the CIA and how they wanted to, support their ally to exploit a poor country in Southeast Asia. All right. In until 1950, the U.S. and France signed the Indochina Mutual Defense Agreement. So you can see, like at that time, Vietnam was actively fighting against the French in Indochina, and the USA, technically, they had nothing to do, no business whatsoever in Indochina, especially in Vietnam. But somehow in 1950, the US and the French signed the Indochina Mutual Defense Agreement, which is like, what in the world is that? They are not even involved officially in this, but they signed this. All right. And from 1953 to 1954, the US sends $3 billion. At that time, it is massive amount of fortune at that time, but imagine how much it was today. Something in the chat, maybe you can do, the calculation how much $3 billion at that time was today. But yes, the US sends $3 billion in aid to France in Indochina, including 400,000 tons of weapons, 360 aircraft, 347 ships, 1,400 tanks and armed vehicles, 175,000 guns, and that accounted for 75% of France's war budget in the Indochina. Now, so technically, it is the U.S. war in Indochina, not the French war anymore, because the U.S. accounted for 75% of all the war fee. And but like Vietnam, with the fighting of Viet Minh under the leadership of Ho Chi Minh and Võ Nguyên Giáp, still managed to keep winning in Vietnam, even though with against a bunch of tons of modern weapons coming from France and the US, we were still winning. So in the brink of the French was on the brink of losing entirely in Vietnam, like desperation like that. So in 1954, like March or something, that January or March, something like that, the U.S. Secretary of State John Dulles, the guy in the picture you can see with the black chain coat, John Dulles offers France 2 atomic bombs to use in Vietnam. Now the U.S. never officially recognizes or admit this or even talk about it. No, this story came directly from the French general, the one that was offered by John Dulles himself. It was from the French side. The U.S. offered France 2 atomic bombs to use in Vietnam, the same as what they did in Japan. That was what they wanted, right? But the French, that general, they refused this offer not because the French care about Vietnam or even the environment, no. Or, look at what happened in Japan in 1945, or no. The only reason why that the French, they turned down to this offer was because at that time, the Vietnamese military bases, were too close to the French military bases, like intertwined each other. That, and if they drop bombs, A-bombs on Vietnamese military bases, they would kill their own French soldiers too. And that was the only reason why France didn't take the offer from the USA. That is how horrible and how close the relationship between, the US and the French at that time. And in May 13, 1954, Vietnam had a very, very important victory. It is called the Dien Bien Phu victory. Now, I don't know how much you know about this victory, but generally speaking, people in the West do not know much about this victory at all. It is because mainly because your government don't want you to know about this victory. This is a very, very important victory in the world, one of the most important victory in the world, if you think about it. On this day of May 13, 1954, Vietnamese army attacks Dien Bien Phu fortress. That fortress was built and controlled by French army. So Dien Bien Phu is an area in the mountainous area in the north of Vietnam, near the border with Laos. So the French, soldiers, the French army, the French government, they believe they picked that area was because they believe that it is like an impenetrable kind of fortress on the mountain between Vietnam and Laos. So they can, from that high mountainous fortress, they can, observe the whole region of Indochina, and it's like impenetrable. So they like totally safe from all the attacks from enemy. That was why they chose the Dien Bien Phu fortress. But that was also a very wrong decision of the French. The French and the US had equipped this fortress with thick concrete walls and the most modern weapons of the time and claimed it to be impenetrable, right? They made bunkers with super thick concrete walls that they claim that even like Vietnam used bombs or something to bomb it, it will never be able to break into the fortress at all. But somehow Viet Minh still managed to launch a final attack and won and totally destroyed and took over this Dien Bien Phu fortress. With this Dien Bien Phu victory, Vietnam proves to the world that Vietnamese are not just guerrilla fighters. We are also capable of winning on an open battlefield against a powerful enemy. That is very important. And it is proof to all the oppressed people in the world that you can win not just by guerrilla fighting. No, we can win on an open battlefield like the Napoleon Bonaparte kind of style. Like the French, they're very kind of proud of their history. Napoleon Bonaparte about like fighting against Vietnam. A small country in Southeast Asia managed to win against very powerful enemy of French with a heavily backed by the USA on an open battlefield with heavy weapons like that. So it's very important victory. And if you don't know by yet, I encourage you to go check it out. And you can go check out the book by Võ Nguyên Giáp himself, the leader of this victory. The book is called People's War, People's Army. He talked in detail about, the winning and how he came up with all the strategies using the Dien Bien Phu victory, and then, in the war against the USA too. I strongly recommend that book for you. Okay, the Dien Bien Phu victory, as I said, has a lot of meaning to the history of Vietnam and the history of oppressed people in the world. With this victory, Vietnamese forces finally, after 9 years of arduous fighting, Vietnamese successfully decolonized Vietnam and kicked French colonialists out of our country. Very important when we talk about, the conversation a while ago when you keep talking about, like about decolonization and how country need to decolonize, and a bunch of white supremacists, they didn't like this idea because they were afraid that like it was a violence, and also like do the ethnic cleansing, blah blah blah. Like all they did was talk about hypothesis, hypothetically, but they never look at what actually happened in Vietnam. Vietnam was one of the countries that successfully decolonized ourselves after over 100 years of exploitation. And what is Vietnam now? Are we an ethno state? Did we commit massive genocide against French people? No. What we did was that, okay, we specifically kick out the French army and kick out the French government. We announced people that, hey, if you want to stay here, you need to get rid of all of your wealth because it's not yours from the start to begin with, or you better be on our side, or you can go back. You're free to go back. And the truth is, the vast majority of the French settlers and French colonialists who've been living for generations, over 100 years, living for generations in Vietnam, they left right at the moment when Vietnamese people got together and fought back fiercely. They left. They were panicked and they left already. So in the moment of 1954, only the army left, and it was very easily to get. And the picture you see, look at that picture. It is the Viet Minh, one guy, the Viet Minh force, and guarding the way out of the French army to get the heck out of our country. That is the face of colonization. And do not trust anybody if they are against decolonization and they claim that it's like white genocide or we want to build ethno state. No, those people, they are the white supremacists. Don't listen to them. And whenever you encounter any of those white supremacist assholes, just talk to them about Vietnam and how Vietnam successfully decolonized ourselves, and talk about how Vietnam is not an ethno state, and Vietnam never committed any white genocide against any white people. All right. The Day of Victory was a proof to the oppressed people of the whole world that even a poor colonized third world country can win against a very powerful enemy, not just through guerrilla tactics, but also on an open battlefield with heavy weapons. Very important victory to remember that. And don't forget to always mention Vietnam when you talk about decolonization. All right. All right. Now, the French lost in Vietnam. So, wow, they got heavily backed by the USA. What the USA would do during this time? Oh, don't you worry about it. The US already prepared for the case that the French would lose. So while they were, signing the mutual defense agreement with the French in 1950, and then back sent $3 billion to France in 1953 and 1954, they already prepared for the loss of the French in Indochina. By that, it is while backing the French, the U.S. prepared for the event that the French would lose. And the US at that time wanted Vietnam to be like Korea. So immediately from 1950, they started looking for a puppet dictator for South Vietnam. They used the same exact script that they used on Korea, on Vietnam. They also wanted, Vietnam to be divided into North and South as in Korea, and then they wanted to take over the South Vietnam, turn it into a capitalist hellhole, and then push all the the enemy, the communists, into the north, and slowly they will swallow the north. So that was their plan, exactly the same as Vietnam. So right from the 1950, they started looking for a dictator, for puppet dictator for South Vietnam in case France lost, right? In 1952, after 2 years, they finally chose Ngô Đình Diệm, a fascist Catholic who used to work for the king of Vietnam. So Ngô Đình Diệm at the time, the guy, the short guy in the picture, in the top picture, the short black hair Vietnamese guy shaking hand with the U.S. Officials. Ngô Đình Diệm, he used to be the prime minister working for the king of Vietnam. Because this, under the French occupation, the French still kept the royal family as the puppet government. So this Ngô Đình Diệm guy, as the prime minister working under the king, he hated the French because he observed firsthand the exploitation and the humiliation of the French against Vietnamese people, even though royal family. So he hated the French, and because he hated the French, he wanted to seek for a force that can fight against the French. And at that time, he believed to be the U.S. So in 1950, Ngô Đình Diệm went to the U.S. because he was a very strict Catholic, rich too. So through his connection with the Catholic Church, he met with what do you call it? A bishop? Yes. Spellman, a big bishop Spellman, yes. He married the bishop Spellman, and through the connection of that bishop to the U.S. government, he got his way into the U.S. government. At that time, the U.S. was considering a few different candidates to be the puppet dictator, but finally, after all the evaluation, they chose Ngô Đình Diệm, a very strict fascist Catholic, to be the dictator in Vietnam. So after they finished picking the dictator for the South of Vietnam, the UN prepare the government for him, prepare the embassy for him in Vietnam, the weapons, the army. The last thing that the US needed was an excuse for the existence of that puppet regime, like in the South Korea. Now, what did they do? The moment when Vietnam won against the French in 1954 and decolonized successfully our country, Vietnam was forced to sit at a meeting table, and it was called the Geneva Agreement. In that meeting, there was a few big sides such as the US, the USSR, China, French, and Vietnam, the two main sides like that. And Vietnam was forced to sit into this table. And in this table, the U.S., speaking as a very powerful nation that just won against fascism and very rich at that time, one of the greatest country on earth at that time, they forced Vietnam to take their offer that we have to take the 17th parallel as a temporary border to separate North and South Vietnam. According to them, in that meeting, the U.S. said that the 17th parallel didn't have any political meaning or doesn't have any territory meaning. It's just a temporary borderline for the North and South of Vietnam. The whole purpose of the existence of that temporarily borderline is because Vietnam, both North and South, can have enough time to prepare for a national election in 1956. And from the matter of 1954 to 1956, in the South Vietnam, there will be a temporary government led by Ngô Đình Diệm. So that was an excuse that the U.S. did, that the U.S. took to put that puppet fascist dictator to power in the South of Vietnam without any democracy whatsoever. No Vietnamese ever voted for that government. None of us wanted it. But the truth is that election never happened. It never happened. In 1955, the U.S., and the puppet government of the South of Vietnam made a some kind of a call for public opinion, something like that, 1955, and they made up a number that like 98% of Vietnamese in the South of Vietnam voted for Ngô Đình Diệm. All right, that report from the puppet government of the South of Vietnam was even doubted by the CIA themselves. You can go to the CIA archive and check it. The report of the CIA about the public opinion report of the puppet government of the South of Vietnam. Even the CIA themselves very much doubted this number from their own puppet government in South Vietnam, because CIA said that, oh, isn't a matter of that, like vast majority of Vietnamese people in the South were living in a rural area, and vast majority of them are either illiterate or don't care or hated the puppet government. So there's no way that 98% of all entire in the South of Vietnam would vote for Ngô Đình Diệm. It's impossible. And then in 1965, in the memoirs written by the President Dwight Eisenhower at that time, President Eisenhower said this himself, that the reason why the U.S. diplomatically blocked Vietnamese elections in 1956 was because they believed that at least 80% of Vietnamese would vote for Communist Ho Chi Minh. That was why that election never happened. So yes, that is the the whole existence of the involvement of CIA and the U.S. in Vietnam War. And even though lots of you've been taught in your schools that the Vietnam War started in 1965, something like that, but actually no, it started right from 1950, while Vietnam was still actively fighting against the colonialist French. They were looking for a puppet and started planning everything right from 1950. In 1965, it's just another excuse for them to finally launch a genocide war against Vietnamese people based on a totally fabricated incident, which is the Tonkin incident. That never happened. All right. And in 2005, an unclassified document from the CIA stated that nothing happened on the Gulf of Tonkin. On that day, nothing happened. It just totally misreported, and the U.S. just took it as an excuse to officially launch a genocidal war against Vietnamese people. So, right, that is my presentation about the early history of the OSS and CIA in Vietnam. Thank you so much for your attention. Now, if you have any question, feel free to ask me. I'm here to answer all of your questions.
Hello, EJ back here. EJ from NonCompete. I'll go ahead and put our names up just in case anybody's not familiar with us. If you're just joining us from All Power Books or Midnight Books, then welcome. Thank you for having us. And let me see. I'm just getting our display names up here, and then we have a question already for the live event. Let's see. First of all, did the OSS become the CIA, or was there a difference between the organizations? The OSS became the CIA, right? It was like built.
Yeah, they became the CIA. They were built.
The OSS was a wartime organization, right? It was basically a World War II organization, and then after the war ended, the presidential administration realized, it was Truman, right? Realized that they would need to continue having this kind of espionage because of the Cold War.
Because so they are continuously in war. The U.S. knew that they would continuously be in war, so they need an organization.
To this day. So there you go. All right, we got another question from the live event. This is kind of interesting. This is being broadcast at a live event right now. Do you see parallels between the Palestinian struggle as well as the Vietnamese struggle you outlined? Well, you just wrote a blog about this, Luna, so I'll let you take this question.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely good question. Yes, a little bit talk about the background information about Palestine and Vietnam. You know, like Vietnam and Palestine, we started our relationship very, very early, right? From 1968, when Vietnam was actively fighting against the U.S., the genocide, the U.S. genocide war against our own people. 1968 was like the fiercest year. You know, the Tet Offensive kind of year, and my grandpa also died in this year. 1968, Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh officially had, you know, relationship with the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, at that time. And in 1954, I believe, you know, when Vietnam was like winning against the USA in the north of Vietnam, we had, you know, the PLO had an official headquarters in Hanoi, Vietnam. That's how close we were. And the moment when Palestine declared their independence, we were one of the first countries in the world to officially recognize Palestine and started our relationship officially from that. And the Palestinian President Arafat, he visited Vietnam 10 times total in his office time. So that was how close it was between the two countries. And Vietnam always been in the side with Palestinian people, and we always all the time advocate for the solution that was offered by the PLO in the 80s. You know, the PLO, after a long struggling with, you know, the Israeli troops and military forces, they came up with a solution, you know, to have two states coexist like equally with each other. And we, from that very moment that, you know, offer was introduced, Vietnam agree with that. So yes, Vietnam very much view ourselves, you know, the history of our struggles against all kinds of enemy, and we very much, you know, like sympathize with Palestinian people. We support Palestinian people. And actually this year, 2023, Vietnam just sent a delegate team to Palestine. And in the article I talk about it, a delegate team, official delegate sent to Palestine and to visit the actual situation there. And, you know, yes?
I'm gonna say, if you want to read the full story, go to non-compete.com, and the blog is right there on the front page, just because we have a lot more questions and I want to get through as many because we're almost out of time. But it is a very interesting story, and I do recommend you go read the full blog article at non-compete.com. So that serves the double function of moving forward to another question and plugging our website. So all right. So next, let's see. How did Vietnamese get their weapons to fight the guerrilla war? I can start this one because I read People's War, People's Army by Vo Nguyen Giap, and it talks about this a lot. In fact, there's one huge parallel that I noticed between the writings of Che Guevara and Vo Nguyen Giap, who was the great general of Vietnam, who defeated the French, the Japanese, and the U.S. Empire. But they both, Guevara and Vo, were obsessed with obtaining weapons, and specifically automatic weapons. And they both talked about a lot how they just never had enough automatic weapons, and they just never had enough ordnance and material to fight their wars. They always needed more. But at the very beginning, in the period of time, especially that Luna was talking about, when the Japanese were occupying Vietnam, they would actually go and raid Japanese military bases unarmed or armed with like sticks and knives and that sort of thing, and steal firearms because they didn't have any. And a lot of the firearms that they stole were old, rotting rifles from like the World War I era. Or even from the 19th century, because they were not sending Japan's most elite troops to Vietnam. It was basically a garrison, and they were using some of their old, outdated equipment there. So, and then those were the weapons that they carried forward to fight against the French in the Revolution and in the war in the early 50s. And some of the weapons even continued to be used into the war with the USA. And I'll also say that the kind of cottage industry of weapons production in Vietnam was really impressive. Now, if you watch a lot of Western kind of like the gun nut YouTube channels, which I have watched a few of those, Forgotten Weapons is one of them that I've seen, where they talk about these like handmade weapons in Vietnam, and they make fun of them. They'll be like, oh, look at this reproduction Colt 1911 that the Vietnamese made. It's so terrible. Look how bad the it's not smooth and it's not as good as these nice American guns. But you got to remember, they were making these weapons out of scavenged material that they found in the field. Like a lot of the material was like basically like they were taking bombs that fell on them and turning those into guns and that sort of thing in their workshops. And these weren't like trained engineers, these were just normal.
We had to took the gunpowder out of those bombs to make bullets.
Yes, to make bullets. It's really impressive that they were able to make semi-automatic weapons at all in those conditions. So, it always kind of like raises my hackles when I see Western gun nuts talking about, oh, look at these crappy Vietnamese guns. But, like it was very impressive to me that they were able to make those at all. So anyway, if you want to learn more about that, go ahead.
Yeah, another the quick fact about how we won against the French in the Vietnamese full victory in the high mountainous area like that, and they had like thick concrete walls. At that time, they did that because they believed that Vietnam could never be able to bomb that fortress at all, because there's no way, it's a steep mountain. But actually, what we did was like we disassembled all the cannons and we brought it up to the top of the mountain, parts by parts, days by days like that. And then when we got to the top of the mountain, we like reassemble them all together, and that's why we can shoot from the top of the mountain down to the fortress in the valley. That's how we won.
We got about, I guess, 3 or 4 more minutes, so we're gonna have to go through the last few quick. But there's so many good questions. Thank you all for interacting with us.
Yeah, so many.
Let's see. This one, okay, Luna, just real quick in like a couple of sentences. There was an assassination attempt. Was that the CIA where the guy sat down and ate with Ho Chi Minh, or was that a different organization that was trying to assassinate?
That was from Chiang Kai-shek.
Oh, the Chinese?
The Chiang Kai-shek,
the Chinese nationalists?
Yes.
Interesting. Oh, okay. Well, so I'm not. Do you know of any CIA attempts to assassinate Ho Chi Minh?
Yes, that's actually there were several attempts, but most of them they all failed.
Well,
but not failed. As many as how the CIA, not as many times as CIA tried to assassinate Fidel Castro.
Not Fidel Castro. I knew that's what I was thinking as well.
But there was some.
Why are Vietnamese so friendly to Americans today, despite the U.S. government's horrible treatment of Vietnam in the past? And I would add, and the present, because it's not like the USA is really treating Vietnam that great today. Why, Luna? Why are you all so nice to us?
Let me tell you this. Actually, it is a bloody war that we have been through, but the history of Vietnam, the 2,000 years of history of Vietnam, almost the entire 2,000 years of our existence, of history existence, is war. So besides the USA, we have many different other enemies. So you're just one of them. Actually, you're not that important. Don't worry, because even after had the war with the USA, we had war with the Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge too. So it's very tough. So and we are friendly people. We are forgiving people, but we not forget. We will never forget our history, and we would do everything that we can to make sure that the same thing will never happen in the future. But at the same time, we're forgiving people. And as long as, you respect us, respect our culture, and respect our people, we're good friends.
Yeah, and I can attest from living in Vietnam for 10 years that Vietnamese are extremely welcoming and friendly to me, despite my citizenship as a USA citizen. All right, I'm going to answer one last question. I think this is we will answer this question. I think it's a really important question right now, especially with everything that's going on right now. Somebody asked, can you talk a bit about revolutionary optimism in a time where you were fighting against an empire? And Ho Chi Minh talked about revolutionary optimism quite a lot. I have a video on my channel, NonCompete. If you go to youtube.com/NonCompete and just type in the search bar revolutionary optimism, you'll find it. I'm extremely inspired by Ho Chi Minh and Fred Hampton and several other comrades on this point. But I think it's something we really need to be thinking about right now, because it's very grim times right now. I'm not, I think we're all a little bit depressed right now, to be honest, with all this miserable news we're getting, and just seeing how liberals are just having this full-throated endorsement of the genocide in Palestine.
Oh my gosh,
we need revolutionary optimism. And I think, Luna, you could probably explain better than I could what the difference between revolutionary optimism and run-of-the-mill standard optimism are.
So, long story short, optimism, as we all know, it's just like blind belief that everything's gonna be fine. Just like what liberals will always say to you, like everything's gonna be fine, just calm down. But the revolutionary optimism is an optimism based on dialectical materialism that I recommend you to check the book that I translated and available in Midnight Bookstore. Long story short, it means that like we as communists, we must learn and know
And all
about
power books.
where we are. Exactly. All power books. So we as a communist, we must learn where we are, who we are, what material conditions that we are at right now, and we must know what do you want in the future. So we know from where we are right now and what do you want to become in the future, and from that, based on using like dialectical materialism and historical materialism, you would have like the clear path, a way to how to get to the B point from the A point. And we always have to believe this. The purpose of us being a communist is because we want to liberate humanity. We want to end exploitation and all kinds of oppression in the world, and we will do it because we are the one who has the power. We are the 99% of the population. We are the true power, and one day, no matter what, we will win. The matter is that you have to believe the day that you will win, but not like blind belief. You have to be clear about how to get there, where we are right now. So that is a revolutionary optimism. So Vietnam is the darkest day, under the occupation of the fascists, and then colonialists, and then the imperialists. You're saying like, how can't you imagine how desperate it was? Like over 100 years of continuous fighting, and millions of our people just died of that. But in the darkest day of the history of Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh, Võ Nguyên Giáp, and many other Vietnamese communists still strongly believe in our heart that one day we will win, and one day our nation will be independent and our people will be free. And that was why they never stopped fighting. They never stopped fighting. They sacrificed everything they could. Ho Chi Minh never had a family of himself. He never had a children or a wife. He just dedicated his entire life for the struggle of Vietnam. And he died in 1969, 6 years before we actually won. But in his will, if you read his will, you can see the revolutionary optimism of Ho Chi Minh on his dying bed, that Vietnam will win. Our people will be free. The matter that we have to keep fighting, keep doing it, making it come true, because that is a revolutionary optimism.
Absolutely. And I am sharing the link now in the chats to the Revolutionary Optimism video, which Luna did help me work on. Luna actually held the camera in the video and helped me with writing it and all that sort of thing. So anyway, that's I think that's the note we should end on, really, because that's what we need right now. We need revolutionary optimism. Things are very tough. But when I think to the situation that the Vietnamese were in, and I've spoken to veterans of the Vietnam War from the winning good side, the communist side, and they tell me, very grim, grisly stories. And they tell me that, it's now today, so many years later, it's obvious that Vietnam won. But when they were fighting that war, they didn't know, they didn't know what was going to happen. Luna's father lost his father in the Tet Offensive. And there was just a lot of suffering in Luna's village, but they got through it. Luna comes from one of those heavily bombed parts of Vietnam, and I've driven across the bridge that they were trying to destroy with those bombs. I have seen the lakes that are bomb craters, and I've talked to veterans there who survived against all odds.
Nearly in every single district, not the city, but districts in Vietnam that you pass by, there will be a monument for the martyrs who died fighting against all kind of resistance wars we had. That was how much sacrifice we did for the peace today.
Yeah. Stu just asked, why are we in different places? I'm visiting my family in the USA, and Luna.
We're on the two sides of the earth right now.
We're on the two sides of the world, but we will be reunited in a month or two. So anyway, well, thank you everybody for joining us. We're very glad to be invited to this event by All Power Books and by Midnight Books. If you ever are in California
And
and
a
have a
super
chance,
sticker.
oh, we did get a super sticker, and I saw them. It is a lemon and a lime giving each other a high five. So Luna, from different sides of the world, high five. No, you're going the wrong way. Oh, there you go.
1, 2, 3.
Look at that. We coordinated it, even though we're
Yeah, we did
opposite.
it.
We did it through revolutionary optimism. All right. Well, thank you. Yeah, like I was saying, if you're ever in California, you want to check out some amazing radical bookstores, check out All Power Books and Midnight Books. You can buy a copy of Luna's translation of the Vietnamese curriculum of Marxism. I'm not speaking well tonight. The Vietnamese curriculum of Marxism-Leninism, part 1 on dialectical materialism. It is available right now. You could also get the ebook for free anywhere in the world at banyanhouse.org/shop. We are over time, so I'm going to wrap the stream up. But again, solidarity. Our thoughts go out to the people of Palestine. I think that's the best point to end on. And I wish them all revolutionary optimism as they struggle for their freedom and liberation. So thank you for watching.
Free
We'll see
Palestine.
you. Free Palestine. Have a good night or day or wherever you are. Bye-bye.
Bye.